welcome back to GB News. Let's bring you up to date with what is happening this morning.
The Times looks at the crisis in the NHS as a chief medic is warning today A&E delays could be killing hundreds every week.
The Guardian leads on the fury at Minister's plans for a real terms pay cut for NHS workers.
The Telegraph covers Rishi Sunak's decision to shelve Liz Truss's child care reforms. That's a little flavour of some of the papers this Bank Holiday Monday. Let's go inside the papers now. Joining us to do that is the former Conservative advisor, Claire Pearsall. Very good morning to you. And fresh from Panto, Christopher Jenkins. You finished your last show last night.
Last night we drove through the night and got here, and it's been very exciting.
Well, thank you very much for putting in a shift after however many days on the trot that you've been doing Panto.
I couldn't miss not being with you.
But
both of you.
You didn't come in character.
No, I didn't come in character. No, sadly not.
Did you have a lovely time? Because you played Mrs. Smee in
Peter Pan. I did, and it's a rare one, but it's so interesting because in Darlington now is called the Hippodrome, and it's had a big refurbish. Millions of pounds have been spent on it, which is beautiful. But I first did my pantomime dame 46 years ago in that very theatre.
Mother Goose, wasn't it?
It's Mother Goose.
We interviewed you, well, not all those years
that's
ago,
right, yes.
a few weeks ago.
That's right, that's right.
Midway through rehearsals, and I thought that was a lovely story. It's gone full circle.
I know, unbelievable. I mean, it doesn't seem possible, really, but...
Is it as exhausting as it seems?
Yeah, 2 shows a day. I mean, it's tough. But, I mean, it was... And the audiences... there's been a lot of interesting comments about the fact that business has been really bad all over the country. But we certainly had fantastic... The only sad thing was, I'm going to talk in a minute about Rishi Sunak. He is, of course, his constituency is Richmond, which is just... He didn't come and see me.
Well, I think he was only home for 2 days or something like that.
But that's no excuse.
Boxing Day. Were you running on Boxing Day?
Yeah, we were. Yeah, 2 performances, yes. No excuse.
I mean, Rishi Sunak's nothing better to do right now. Claire, we should bring you in. We don't want you to feel left out. Did you have a good festive period? Did you go to the Panto?
I didn't go to the Panto, unfortunately, but I really wish I had now. And my local theatre, the Stag Theatre in Sevenoaks, had a brilliant production of Alice in Wonderland. But sadly, I didn't have time to make it.
Well, Happy New Year to you both. Thanks for coming in, Claire. Do you want to kick us off? This is the front cover of the Times, but actually many of the newspapers focusing on this story this morning.
Absolutely, and it seems to be the headline of every single newspaper. A&E delays, killing up to 500 patients a week. Now, that is a really stark headline. It does state in this article here in the Times that they believe it's somewhere between 300 and 500 people. It's an appalling number, and I think this only highlights further the trouble the NHS is in, and it's all parts of the NHS. If you look at the problems you've got with ambulances coming through, with people being treated in corridors, and at the other end of this, I think the social care issues are really, really now pushed to the fore. If people cannot get out of those beds and into a care home or other premises to support them, then they're sitting in hospitals taking up beds. Something has to be done. I don't know what that something is, and I really worry that we start this knee-jerk reaction and calling things a national crisis and calling for all sorts of vague interventions with no real plan as to how we solve this in the long run.
It just has made me feel like I really hope none of my loved ones need to go into the hospital anytime soon. I've been nagging my parents to make sure they're up to date on their flu vaccines, everything else, just stay away from trouble, because that's the state of the NHS, particularly A&E at the moment. And I think it's the president of the Society of Acute Medicine saying that at the moment the NHS is worse than at the peak of COVID.
Yeah, that is an appalling statement, and it's an appalling headline to be in every single newspaper today. I wonder how many people would have died anyway, which is quite an interesting thought.
Well, he was saying the 500 are because of delays. These 500 a week.
So that's extra, is it?
Yes, yeah. This was.
Well, it is terrifying then.
Yeah. A worrying state of affairs indeed. But as you say, Claire, no obvious solution. I mean, people all going to blame the government, aren't they, for not sorting out the strikes and retaining staff. But if they do come out with this inflation-busting request that nurses, for example, are coming out with, who's going to foot the bill?
Well, I think there is a real problem. And how much money can you realistically keep pouring into the NHS as an institution if it is not working? It is one of the largest pots of money that go into the NHS. So if that's not enough, how much is ever going to be enough? And I worry that we're not looking at things like GP services, services. I know that people in my area still struggle to get any kind of appointment, whether it be a telephone appointment or even the e-consult online system, which is broken. So I think that just pouring money into it doesn't work. You need to actually now start to look at how you fix it. If you have to bring in the private sector, then so be it. We have to have that conversation.
I would wonder whether we shouldn't start, I've said this on this programme before, paying, for whatever we went. I mean, last year I had a new knee put in and I had a new valve put into my heart, and I could have afforded to pay a little. I'm not saying, the huge amounts that if you go with private health care, they charge. I mean, I think this knee would have cost something like £20,000 and also the heart. But I think, if one could afford to have paid a fraction of that, it would help perhaps.
But what about a small fee for regular GP appointments? Most people would probably pay for a small fee, £10 or
certainly for missing one.
If they can afford it, just to be able to get.
I agree, that's terrifying.
Yeah, and I think people are coming around now more to that, as long as it doesn't exclude those people who physically cannot afford to do so. But you look at other healthcare systems within Europe, for example, our nearest neighbours, they do have that kind of system. So if you can pay, then I think you should now perhaps put into that system.
Yeah, France does it, doesn't it? Very successfully.
And in Australia, they do exactly what you're talking about. There's a sense of conscience, and if you can afford, for example, to pay for your own childbirth costs, then you're encouraged to do so to relieve the pressure on the state. It's a sort of a matter of conscience, but I suppose politically that would be disastrous for the Conservatives, who would say we're once again squeezing the middle classes.
But I think it's any political party, if I'm perfectly honest. Nobody wants to touch the sacred cow that is the NHS.
No, you're right.
It's going to go badly with voters.
Biggins, you've chosen the front of the Daily Mail, which talks not just about the crisis in the NHS, but the omni-crisis, or the triple headache, as they are dubbing it.
Rishi does have a triple headache coming up in this new year. Of course, this is what we've just been talking about, the 500 people dying a week. There's a record 45,000 Channel migrants crossed it just in last year, which is a terrifying thought. A, because I think, we don't know what to do with them, and also B, that they die. I mean, it's just horrific. And there are people gaining from this in the countries that they're coming from, making huge amounts of money. The whole thing is terrible. And then, of course, the unions prepare a double walkout for a week of rail chaos. I mean, I know how bad it was, because people were trying to come up to Darlington to see me and they couldn't come up. Trains were being cancelled. My producer came to see a final performance, and he had to stand all the way from Darlington to London.
And it's not just on the days of the strikes, it's often either side, and a lot of the staff are working to rule, so on the days when the strikes aren't on, they're perhaps knocking off earlier than people were expecting, so trains that they were planning to take weren't there, and it's just genuinely, people have had total Christmas chaos.
I know, and you feel sorry for people, because they want to celebrate with their families, and it was made absolutely impossible this year.
And a real knock-on effect for the economy as well. People don't spend money, they don't go out. The hospitality industry suffered as well because of all this.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, really, really got to be highlighted, that the hospitality industry, which has taken a hit over the last 2 years, the Christmas period is their biggest time of year. And if people can't get out and can't get home again, they're just not going to turn out. And we're going to lose that industry if we're not careful.
I do think it's interesting you're talking about how Panto did really well in spite of the cost of living crisis. I do think there is an appetite, with all of the doom and gloom, for a bit of silliness.
Oh, absolutely.
A bit of light-hearted enjoyment, isn't there?
People want to laugh.
Yeah.
And,
if you don't laugh, then you cry.
You do. And, to go out every night and hear absolutely a whole 1,000 people laughing together was joyous.
Yeah.
Absolutely joyous.
Well, hopefully we can provide some this morning as well. Claire, let's move on to the Telegraph. I mean, this is also connected to all of the things we've been talking about, because the government planning to shelve childcare reform, presumably because it will be extremely expensive, and that'll save them some money.
But it's one of these things where you start to look at it and you think it's really, really short-sighted. If you want the economy to pick up, you want people to be employed. And in most people's cases, childcare is the biggest barrier to, especially mothers, going back into the workplace. I liked the childcare reforms put forward by Liz Truss. It was about the one and only thing I did like about Liz Truss's short tenure in Parliament. But I think that to shelve this now is the wrong way of going about it. in the general terms of government spending, this is not going to be huge. And I think that we need to look at all of those childcare facilities that we're losing. There's been an overall fall of 10,600 providers since August 2019.
Do you think he's just jettisoning this because of its association with Liz Truss, and he just doesn't want anything to do with her legacy? Because it seems to me one of the suggestions that her policy came up with was just to remove the barrier to the number of children, or to increase the number of children per carer, which actually would cost the Treasury zero.
It would. And I do think there probably is something along the lines of I don't want anything to do with it because it has Liz Truss's hands over it. But we really do need to grow up in government if that's going to be the case, because you can't hold things like this back when it's going to put more people into employment and get that economy building again.
Grow up being the operative word.
Yes, exactly. In childcare.
Well, no, but all of them. I mean, you know, the whole of political situation, they should all grow up.
But isn't this issue a potential vote winner? It would play well with a large part of the electorate, which the Conservative Party have to try and target right now.
Absolutely, they need to target. Interesting, in the Times yesterday, it did say that the Labour Party are not going to have it as easy as they think they're going to have it.
Yes, it was the waverers, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the waverers, yes. So, I mean, very interested to see what happens.
And I believe the childcare reformers were particularly powerful as a tool in the marginals with the Lib Dems, where people were undecided between Lib Dem or Conservative, and that could be a win for the Lib Dems jettisoning that. But you want to talk now about another Times story, Biggins. This is about Extinction Rebellion. Perhaps some would say growing up. They've decided to give up on protests. What's their take in the Times?
Well, I mean, thank goodness they have grown up a bit, because, I mean, the protests were just absolutely archaic. I mean, it was what they did. I don't know why they didn't realise what they were doing to the ordinary person on the stage at that particular time. You know, not being able to get to hospitals, not being able to get to appointments, not being able to get to work. You know, gluing themselves to dangerous motorways and hanging from bridges. I mean, you know, we all know that what they were talking about was true and right, but there's another way of doing it. You can't do it to society.
The royals go about it very well, don't they? So you think with the King in his speech on Christmas Day, we have the Earthshot Prize with the Prince of Wales.
Yes.
They constantly bang the drum for climate change awareness and environmental issues.
They do it
without
brilliantly.
Jamming it down your throat in a way that gets people's backs up.
Yeah, and also, you know, that people aren't going to vote for them. And the sympathy goes, you know, because what they're fighting for is good. But they're going about it the wrong way, and I'm pleased that they've now decided.
Claire, I wonder how much of this was influenced by all of the rail strikes and the amount of disruption the public are already dealing with, so sympathy would have been ebbed to a very low point for protests like Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion.
I think that probably does have a part to play in it. His public mood has changed, it has moved on. They're fed up with people gluing themselves to roads and can't get around. And if you don't have trains and buses, people aren't coming into the capital, which tends to be where they target. So it wasn't having the effect that they wanted. I like the fact that they've come out there and admitted that it hasn't succeeded and they need to rethink. I think all of the other organisations, as you say, people like Just Stop Oil, need to take that to heart and stop stuffing up people's lives with these protests where people did have sympathy for them. They now look at them and think, you are ridiculous, you're not doing what you're supposed to do.
I think perhaps the general public should start protesting.
Against the protests.
Against the protests.
Oh gosh, no more protesting. And Claire, let's talk about the story in the front of The Guardian. Really worrying. I mean, Arron and I both got young kids. 3 in 4 children dislike how they look. I always think of my mum when I hear stories like this. Growing up, my mum always used to say to me, focus on the thoughts inside your head, not the reflection in the mirror. It was like an adage. She was constantly banging it into me. Don't be vain. Think about what's going on inside your head. But it's hard for children to do that.
It is.
They're bombarded.
It is. And we were all incredibly lucky that we didn't grow up in an age of social media. We didn't have that. I used to go and get a magazine occasionally and look at it, but the images in that magazine at the time were not unobtainable. It was makeup tips and things like that, which was just as a teen growing up was fantastic. I think now kids are under so much pressure to look a certain way, to be a certain way. The filters that are put on social media are giving an unrealistic image of what somebody is supposed to look like. I remember my son, who is now 14, when he was younger, he just wanted a six-pack. because that's what everybody had. And I said, right, should we just take a little look around the streets now? You tell me how many people you think have really got a six-pack, and you start to then break that down. But those conversations with children are really, really important, because these things are in their lives 24 hours a day.
It's only skin deep. Who's banging that drum that, you know, there's so much more to a person than the superficial?
Yes, but how many photographs do you take on a daily basis of your kids, and they know that, they see that happening, and then they want to see the picture, and then they want to take their own pictures. There's an unhealthy focus right now on pictures and cameras.
Yeah, absolutely is. And the bullying that goes on this on social media for those photographs, if they are not perfect. And that is the real sad fact, because I think my son is perfect. Whatever photo I take of him, I think he's perfect. However, he will pull it apart. His friends would always pull it apart, and they start sharing these memes and TikToks and whatever else around. That's the pressure.
I mean, can you imagine if some of what happened when we were younger was still available online? I mean, I don't think we'd never have worked again.
I don't even want to think about it. It's so sad, isn't it, for the youngsters coming up? The pressure and the mental health crisis.
It is terrible.
It's going to explode.
And, you know, I can tell you now, the six-pack is not all it's made out to be.
Yeah, I agree.
How are we doing for time? Have we got time for one more? I'm just checking in. Okay, let's end,
let's look
shall we?
ahead. Right note.
Yeah, absolutely.
Christopher, in The Guardian, what we should be watching, listening to.
Well, I know they've given
the panto.
They've given us a real bumper guide, and I'm going to do one each in our three spots today. I'm going to start off with television, and I'm really looking forward to Nolly, which is about Noel Gordon from Crossroads, and I think it's going to be very exciting. It's got all of my favourite actresses, Helen Bonham Carter, who
I love her.
Oh, she is so everything she does, she's fantastic. Yeah. So she's going to be playing Gordon, and I think it's going to be very, very interesting. I mean, I was a Crossroads fan. I mainly watched it to watch the scenery move and do all those things. But anyway, it'll be good.
Is Helena one of your buddies?
Well, I do know her, and she is fantastic, and she's such a nice girl. Yeah. The other one, I don't know. Did you watch the Squid Game?
No, I didn't.
I watched one and I hated it.
Oh no, you have to watch more.
Do you?
I watched it really quickly.
Really? Really? You binged then? So that's coming.
Be amenable to subtitles.
Yeah.
Except there is.
Yeah. So it's hard work.
No, not at all. Not at all. It really is.
I find it hard work. But anyway, the challenge is coming back. So that's going to be. But they say potentially it could be a car crash.
Well, I always worry about these sequels to a very good one-off.
They're never as good.
Standalone show. This feels like it's been done for money.
And another great actress coming back in a show called True Love on television is Julie Walters, who I think we haven't seen enough of, and this is going to be she plays a retired police officer who meets an old flame. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Some little TV highlights of 2023.
Succession's back.
Yeah. Oh, Succession's back.
Yes, thank goodness.
I haven't quite finished the last series, but it takes me forever because I have to watch it with my husband, and we're like ships in the night shifts. But I'm going to try and get that done. Right, we say goodbye to Big Insect.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We've got lots of paper reviews with you this morning. It's a real treat this bank holiday, so we'll see you again in just around an hour.